Okay, hello everyone. Today we are here with Dale from Real Seekers, and we are going to have a debate on the modal ontological argument. How are you doing, Dale?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to this debate. I saw your video on Mr. Cloner and the ontological argument. So, yeah, like I said to you in the comments, this is, I think, the best. It actually amounts, in the technical sense, to an absolute proof, in my opinion, for God's existence. So, yeah.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if it works, then yeah, it will be like a proof because there is no probabilistic, uh, yeah, element to it, right? It will be like a pure logical thing, right? Yeah,
It's akin to a logical proof. It's 100%
right.
in my book. So, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just for context, for those who don't know, I made a video about a parody of the moral ontological argument, and it was called the Mr. Cloner parody. But right at the moment, I don't think that's a good parody. I changed my mind on that, but I think there is another way to parody the argument. But anyway, I think first it's better if you present the argument, right? Like, can you maybe briefly or whatever, however you can take your time if you want. You
Yeah.
present the moral ontological argument, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if I guess if you bring up my slides, I can control it from the studio, right?
I have to agree. I have to add it. Okay.
Okay. And okay, perfect. Okay, so just so the audience knows, so there are different um, phases in the historical development of the ontological argument. So, phase one obviously started with the guy who originated it in the 11th century, a guy named Saint Anselm, who developed an ontological argument, which I think is heavily misunderstood by atheists and skeptics online. They basically just think, well, you can just define God into existence. There's a lot more to it than that, but essentially, there were some objections and parodies that were made against that argument, and the second phase came in, I think, after the Immanuel Kant era, right? So existence itself is not a property, and it's not greater to exist than not to exist, and that sort of thing. But then we come to the 20th century, and this is where modern ontological arguments are made using modal logic. Again, this is a form of logic that didn't exist prior to the 20th century. And it's really with modal logic that we see the ontological argument. As I said, it's an absolute proof. You cannot logically deny it. So I'm making very strong claims with this argument. I would not make that for the cosmological argument or a teleological argument or any of the other arguments. I think that it's at least possible that those are wrong. But with this is 100%. So the version of the modal ontological argument that I like is by a guy named Dr. Yujin Nagasawa, who kind of modified Alvin Plantinga's version made in the 1970s. And you can see it up on the screen. So, premise number one, it is logically possible, that should say, that a real maximally great being, aka God, exists. Or if you take out the real, a maximally great being exists. And again, Juan has told us in his video he accepts this premise. So there we go. Premise two, if it is possible that a real maximally great being exists, then a real maximally great being exists in a logically possible world. Premise three, if a real maximally great being exists in some possible world, then it exists in every possible world. And the reason that follows is once we see the definition of what a maximally great being or a real maximally great being is, it's inherent to the concept. Premise four, if a real maximally great being exists in every possible world, then it exists in the actual world. Then premise five, if a real maximally great being exists in the actual world, that's the same as saying it actually exists. So therefore, a real maximally great being exists. And so just some definition. So it's important to understand what possible worlds are. in modal logic. These are not akin to the multiverse. Even if the multiverse is true, although that can help people understand it, the multiverse itself, if it was true, would constitute a single logically possible world. It's all contained within the one possible world. So possible worlds, they're conceptual objects or abstract objects. They're akin to sets in mathematics, right? You have a set of numbers. Well, with possible worlds, basically you have a set of all the propositions that are either true or false relative to our actual world. So that's what possible worlds is about in modal logic. Is that making sense, Juan, or you look confused there?
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that definition, because look, this is the definition I have. In modal logic, a possible world is a complete, consistent way the world could have been or could be, used as a formal framework to define necessity and possibility, right? I mean, it's a possible world. It's not a proposition. It's a world. It's like a world, right? That it just possibly exists, right?
But yeah. So what they mean, the world is the set of all the proposition, what could or could not be, or something like that. It's relative to the actual world. So there's a possible world where it's true that I have red hair. That Dale has red hair is a true proposition in the set of all the propositions of that world.
Yeah.
So the definition you gave is exactly what I'm saying, maybe just in different languages. But the point I want to get across to the audience is that possible worlds, they don't necessarily actually exist. They don't have to have concrete existence like a multiverse does or something like that, right? Maybe every possible world actually exists, but maybe they just exist in our heads, kind of thing, right? So that's the main point I want to get across. Next, so a maximally great being is basically Alvin Plantinga's definition. So it just means that you have a necessary being, a logically necessary being that is omniscient, omnibenevolent, and omnipotent. A real maximally great being is Yujin Nagasawa's nuance. He says, okay, we have a logically necessary personal being who has the properties of knowledge or propositional knowledge, power, and benevolence to the maximal compossible degree. So that's consistent with saying omniscience, omnipotence, and that if those are logically possible to be omnipotent and omniscient, then that's what the real maximum great being has. If it's impossible to be omniscient because of some paradox or inherent contradiction or something in the concept, cool, then the real maximum great being has the highest level of knowledge that is actually possible, and the highest level of power that is possible, and the highest level of benevolence that's possible with respect to each other. So that's what the real nuance is there. Just Juan, does that make sense in terms of the definition there, the difference between a maximum great and a real maximum great?
Yeah, I think I kind of get what he's trying to do there. Right.
Cool. All right, cool. All right. So how do you challenge ontological arguments? Well, traditionally there have been 4 attempts. So number 1, you say, well, it's logically invalid. The conclusion doesn't follow from the premise. Literally no one in the world dares to say that about an ontological. We're talking about the PhD, most famous philosophers and smartest people in the world. This is a valid argument. This is valid. The conclusion, if the premises are assumed to be true, the conclusion inevitably and is guaranteed to be true. It's logically inevitable. The conclusion is true. It's impossible to deny the conclusion if you affirm that these premises are true. So that's the definition of validity for a deductive argument. So this argument is valid. It doesn't commit any logical fallacies. Again, the smartest philosopher, Dr. Alvin Plantinga, is smart enough to avoid begging the question fallacies and other things like this. So number 3, logical soundness. Okay, are the premises of the argument, are they in fact actually true? Or, as I like to go, I argue for deductive strength. based on the evidence, are we warranted in believing each of the premises are probably true or more probable to be true than false? And that would make the argument deductively strong. And on that front, Juan actually, in his video, and surprising to me, he accepts the first premise. So he can't deny that now, unless he's changed his mind. But he accepts every single premise in this argument except premise 3. Premise 3, he would say, no, that's a false premise. So that's where I expect most of our discussion will be on. But so it's up to me to prove that premise 3 is probably true given the evidence. All right. And also, there's another way to defeat it. Most atheists and skeptics, they don't have a clue what's wrong. They say, well, yeah, the ontological argument, as you stated, it's valid, and it looks sound to me. It looks like it's deductively strong. I can't figure out what the problem is. So I'm just going to appeal to a defeater via an argument from parity. And I'm going to say, well, sure, the ontological argument would prove that God exists or this real maximally great being exists. But under the same logic, if I swapped out a real maximally great being and I put in something else, like Mr. Cloner or a maximally great island or whatever you want to posit in its place, the same logic would prove that these people exist. I think another analogy Juan gave was Bob. So Bob would exist. Mr. Cloner would exist. And the trick here, the atheists and skeptics, is they're wanting the theist to go, well, I don't believe in Mr. Cloner. I don't believe in Bob. So therefore, there's something wrong with this, and I have to deny, I can't rely on this to prove that God exists as a real maximally great being. So that in general is, and just so the audience knows very quickly, so Juan is very unique, and I respect, he's a critical thinker. He thinks for himself and comes to his own conclusion. So I respect the heck out of him for accepting the possibility premise. Premise number 1, right? The premise that says it is possible that a real maximally great being exists. This is the premise most atheists and skeptics will want to deny with this argument, but Juan accepts it, which is incredible. But just for the audience, if somebody did deny this and they wanted to prove it, there are 3 ways to prove the possibility premise. The first way is through a priori argumentation, right? So you appeal to a properly basic belief produced by our modal evaluating faculties. Look, once I explained the concept of a real maximum great being, you can conceive in your own mind, yeah, that's conceivable. I can imagine a being like that actually existing. That's possible. It is ontologically possible that something like God could exist. That's a properly basic belief produced by your modal evaluating faculties. There are also a posterior argumentation, evidence for this, right? So people will appeal to the traditional arguments for God's existence to argue for the plausibility of the possibility of God existing. There are also even direct arguments and that sort of thing that certain, hold on, let me, so defenses of the possibility premise, right? So these are some way arguments that philosophers have come up with to actually defend the possibility premise as being true from objective standpoint. But then there's my way. This is why I use a real maximum great being, Yujin Nagasawa's top-down argument. Look, the possibility premise is self-evident. It's warranted because it is self-evident, given the definition of a real maximum great being, right? Remember what it is. It is defined as a logically necessary personal being, all of which we know are possible, necessary things. Numbers are necessary. They exist. There's nothing irrational about logically necessary existence. The laws of logic themselves, Juan himself admits, the laws of logic obtain in every logically possible world. That's what makes them logically possible worlds. So it is possible to be logically necessary. Personal, we have personal beings, human beings, so that makes sense. And then he has the properties of knowledge, power, and benevolence to whatever the maximal possible degree of those properties are. Again, it's saying whatever the logically possible degree is, that's what it has. So by definition, this is logically possible. It's impossible to deny that there's a possible world where this being exists and the 3 to 4 laws of logic exist. And just to clarify, that's what it means. When we say in modal logic, it's just talking about the mode of existence, right? So when we say it's something possibly exists or it's contingent. Sorry, Juan, am I taking too long? Or
No, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt you. Just there is one comment I want to talk about.
Sure.
Do you know a channel called Mega Bloodbath Debates?
Mega blood, but
Yeah,
no.
Mega Bloodbath. It
Bloodbath.
was called tacos. It was called breakfast tacos before.
Okay, no, I've not heard of them.
Okay, maybe you have seen him. He's bigger. He's bigger than me, and he set up debates of this kind of like things, topics. And he says he will be happy to host us if next time we want to make a debate. And it's better because he actually has a bigger audience. So I just wanted to thank him, and yeah, that would be a very cool idea, I think. So he's a bigger chance. Yeah.
I'll say yes. I will just say this: it'll make it later in April or May, just because I'm currently preparing. I've got a huge debate on capturing Christianity. It's going to be my first time there. But I'm debating the Eucharistic miracle of Lanciano and proving that to be.
You took on that challenge. I remember reading his post when he was looking for challenges.
Yeah. So someone reached out, and I guess he was desperate because he took me, and that's not my topic of expertise. But I think I've come up with some good ways of going against it. So
okay,
So to that audience member, I'd love to do an ontological debate with Juan on your channel. So yeah.
Oh yeah, or maybe another topic, as to not repeat this.
Yeah, sure, whatever topic.
Okay.
All right. But anyways, as I was saying, just so you understand, what does it mean for something to exist as logically necessary? So basically, logically necessary means whatever it is exists in every logically possible world. And what it means to be logically possible is that it's a world where the laws of logic are true or they obtain. So the logical law of non-contradiction, but it's more than that. Juan's video thinks it was just about that. No, you also have to be coherent with the logical law of excluded middle, the logical law of identity, and the logical laws of reasonable inference and stuff like that. So when we say something's logically necessary, it exists in all possible worlds where the 3 to 4 fundamental laws of logic obtain or are true. To just be logically possible means, and contingent means, you exist in at least one or more, but not all, possible worlds where the 3 to 4 fundamental laws of logic obtain. If you're logically impossible, then basically, you know what that means. You exist in no worlds where the 3 to 4 laws of logic obtain. It's impossible for that thing to exist and for the laws of logic to be true. So those are what those terms mean. So when we say logically necessary, that God exists in every single world where the laws of logic obtain. And that makes perfect sense given what God is usually by definition. God it can be conceived as the grounding of the laws of logic themselves. They don't just exist abstractly or independently of God. They exist they're grounded in God's logical nature. So with that, I've spoken way too much, so I'll shut up and over to you, Juan.
I just did something. Okay, well, I should have muted the mic. Okay, whatever. So okay. Let me go to normal.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, you say that I agree with the premise one that that a maximally great, or let's just say that a necessary being exists, right? And the reason why I agree with this, okay, I mean, it's trivial. I think there is no contradiction involved in the concept, right? The only way for something to be impossible, like logically impossible, is for for there to be a contradiction. Okay, I guess this will be a good moment to ask when the premise says possible, right? What does that modality? What is the modality of that? Is it logically possible, or is it like metaphysically possible, right? Because then at some point I will start having some issues. What do you
Yes.
think? Yeah.
So I've changed on the when I did my debates with T Jump and in the past, I only argued for the metaphysical necessity, and in that case, there is going to be a problem with axiom S5 and the application of premise 3, stuff like that. But I realize now, and I had my reasons for that. You can thank Phil Bear for proving to me that actually God is morally determined. So he's morally perfect in every logically possible world, not just the feasible worlds. But that's the reason I changed my mind. So this argument is that God, this real maximally great being, is logically possible.
Yeah, I think it's logically possible as well.
Logically necessary. Sorry, I mean.
No, but my question is: the premise says a maximally great being is possible. Okay, that word possible, is it logically possible or is it metaphysically possible?
It's going to be logically possible then. Right. So I guess you're going to disagree then, or?
No, I agree. I think it sounds like it's logically possible. I mean, you could specify what you mean. Like I think
no.
It's logical. Right.
Okay, so there is a difference between us, right? So ultimately, it comes down to, look, if this maximally great being, or real maximally great being, or God, whatever you want to call him, if he contravenes not just the logical law of non-contradiction, but if he is contradictory with any of the fundamental laws of logic, so that if he contravenes the law of identity, then he can't exist, and he's not logically necessary. If he contravenes the law of excluded middle in some way, now that, and believe it or not, it's the law of identity is one of the main reasons I exclude your Mr. Cloner example. I don't think it works because he violates the logical law of identity.
I don't think he does, but I changed my mind. I have a better parody. If I was going to present a parody, I will do something like this. Let me show that.
I'll just say this is cheating, though. This is I prepared from your video.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Look, you have a video where you talk about this one, so you are prepared for this one as well. A necessary lion. 1, it is logically possible that a necessary lion exists. 2, there is a possible world where a necessary lion exists. 3, because the lion is necessary, then it exists in all possible worlds, right? This is the same as 5. And 4, where the necessary lion exists in our world. So how do you respond to this parody?
Yeah, so basically under the logic, right? If it's possible, logically possible for a necessary lion to exist, then all the premises of the argument would work, axiom S5 would work, and therefore, there would be this necessarily existent lion. And we know that the necessary lion does not exist.
We don't know that, by the way.
We know that for a fact, because there was no lion that... so basically, from the law of identity, what is a lion? Okay, a lion is, by definition, a contingent being that is born. So it comes in, it doesn't exist at all time. So it looks like you're smiling because you're going to go into you're violating the law of identity and describing not a lion now. So
I saw that response. You had a video when you made that response. No, I don't think it is part of the definition of a lion that it has to be born, right?
No, it is.
You could describe. It is true that all lions, most lions we know about in the world, right, are born from other lions, right, or are contingent. Of course, that is true, but there could be a being that is just like a lion, looks like a lion, but it was necessary, right? And let me tell you this. Okay, if you think that is a part of, it's a non-negotiable part of the definition of lion, that a lion is contingent, then I can just call it a lion, right? Which is a being that is necessary, and it looks like a lion. It kind of looks like a lion. It has claws. It has a male. It kind of looks like a lion, but it is not born from a lion and is necessary, right? I could define it in this way, and it doesn't do anything to my argument.
Okay, and is it physical?
Yes.
Great. So then it's not logically necessary. It could not exist in a state of near singularity in the early phase of the universe, for example, when
Uh,
when chemistry couldn't exist. If it's physical, it depends on chemistry and atoms and stuff like that, and those didn't exist in the earliest phases of the universe. It was too hot, too dense, and stuff like that. So yeah.
yeah, I could just say he was right near the singularity. The singularity was here. He was just near it, right? I mean, you're saying. I mean, I could.
Okay, but then
I mean,
that's a violation of the law of identity, because, and therefore contradictory, because you're saying he's a physical object. I assume by physical you mean in the ordinary sense, right? So it's physically impossible for a lion or a schmalion to exist in a near singularity state. Like physics just won't allow it.
right. It could be that he's near the singularity and it doesn't do anything to it, right? He has this property, like, or I could just, I mean, I could just deny that. I could just say that our observable universe was a singularity, but the lion was just. I mean, are you trying to say that if there is no space, then the lion cannot exist, right, or something like that?
Yeah,
And because it's
that's
possible that.
that's
I mean,
an inherent part.
I could bite the bullet and say, okay, the lion is made out of a different kind of matter that is different from the normal quark and protons, but it's still natural and it behaves a lot like matter, but it's not the same quark. It's fundamentally different. It's another fundamentally different kind that somehow manages to not disrupt the singularity, or something like that. I don't know. It seems to be.
Okay. Well, quarks are able to survive at a near thing, I think, right? Maybe I'm wrong on that, but in terms of the fundamental particles of the universe, um, even if he's made of a different type of fundamental, he's still a physical type thing, and physical things by definition are what are called property things. They're not substances in their own right. They're a composite of a buildup of the fundamental particles, these quarks, and their relations. And if you're going to say, okay, well, the quarks themselves, they're special, they're schmorks, and they're eternal, they're everything like that. Well, still, the schmalion he's made up of a bunch of different quarks. So I can imagine a different set of schmorks making up this line, and then he's a totally different thing. That means he's contingent, because physical objects are what philosophers call property things, right? So again, they're made up of more fundamental substances and parts and their relationships. So if you change a single part, a single atom, or their relationship, you have an entirely different physical thing. This is the answer to Plato's age-old question of, when does a chair become a new chair? If you take away parts from it. As soon as you take away any part, even an atom, it's a new thing.
But if the lion is necessary, then all these properties are necessary, and the relations among each other, they're also necessary. So it's not true that you cannot change it. Just like you cannot make him cease to exist, you can also not change him, like, because it's, again, if he stops being him, of course at some point it's like he doesn't exist, right? But since he's necessary and he cannot fail to exist, then it follows that you can also not, like, change him, right?
Yeah. So okay. So if you're going to be basically, and everything I say, once I will submit this, that I think I will be able to find a problem with every modification you're making until it reduces either to God, what we're talking about with God, or something that is a necessary dependent upon God. And again, I'm kind of cutting it off now, because no matter if I give an objection, you're going, oh, okay, fine. Well, it covers this. We can keep playing that game. But I'm just going to say this. it will always reduce. When you play this game, there will always be an objection until we either get to, well, what you're defining is God, just with a different name. What you call Schleien is God. It's a real maximum great being. Or you're describing what's called a necessary dependent thing on God. So an example of that are things like numbers. Numbers are necessary. They exist in every possible world, but they are dependent upon God. They're necessary, logically necessary, but they can't exist without being grounded in God in some way. So the Schleien, maybe he does exist, whatever it is, but again, he's going to be dependent, intrinsically dependent on God's existence to exist. And yeah, we would have to go through all of the iterations of my objections, and then you modifying, and then me objecting again, you modifying, until we get there. But that's just the end process I see coming.
Okay, let me just say something else then. Are you familiar with Richard Swinburne's views on necessity?
Yeah.
And what do you think? Because I think Swinburne has a paper saying what kind of necessary being is God or something like that. And he doesn't think that it is logically necessary for God to exist. And the reason he gives is because there is simply no contradiction in saying God doesn't exist, right? It doesn't entail a contradiction. So he thinks that God is, it's like a concrete, it's a contingent being almost, right? It's a brute contingent fact in a way. Like he doesn't think that it's logically necessary for God to exist, like in the strong way. Do you agree with me? Am I getting this right, or what do you think of this?
So yeah, I think he's totally wrong about this, right? So okay, he's correct that there's a thing Alvin Plantinga distinguishes between a strict logical possibility or a strict logical contradiction, right? Where you make explicit A, not A, that contradicts, and positing, oh, God doesn't exist or something like that doesn't commit a strict logical contradiction, but it does create a broad logical contradiction. So once you spell out what these concepts are and understand them, and positing it is logically contradictory in the end, to posit God doesn't exist. Reverse ontological arguments fail in the end because they're not logically possible. It's not logically possible for God not to exist, or a real maximally great being not to exist. And again, even just reflecting upon the way I've defined a real maximally great being, do you agree? I'm just kind of curious. Do you agree with Yujin Nagasawa yourself? Once I've defined the real maximally great being, it's just self-evidently true. Like it's defined in a way that it's to be logically possible. So it's impossible to say, oh well, it's like saying, well, a logically possible being is logically impossible. That's a contradiction, even though it's not explicitly spelled out.
Yeah, I think that I'm not sure that it makes sense to say that a concrete being is necessary. Like it has to exist, and it cannot have failed to exist. Like I don't really get why this is the case. What will account for it? Like I don't see why, because if you say, because the normal response is like, oh, it's his own nature, right? They exist, or what the way Thomists say it is like the existence, his existence and his essence are identical, right? Or something like that.
Oh yeah, I don't go for that. Yeah.
But what I think is a thing only has a nature once it exists, right? So it cannot, like his own nature cannot account for the fact that it exists. I don't see like how could this be the case. I'm not sure it's metaphysically coherent to speak of a concrete being that is necessary, that it just has to exist.
Okay, so let's evaluate it properly. So first of all, it's easy to say, yeah, God does not exist. I don't see anything strictly logically contradictory. Nobody's saying like A and not A here, or God and not God, at least explicitly. So I agree with you on that level, but this is why we have to go a bit deeper now. So what do we mean by God? Okay, I've defined it as a real maximally great being. So now we have to ask, okay, is it possible to say that a real maximally great being does not exist? And once we define it, if we go through the elements, okay, so logical necessity, right? So obviously the laws of logic are logically necessary. You would agree there, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think they are true and they are logically necessary, like in all possible worlds, right? I
Yep.
mean,
All worlds, the laws of logic exist. This is just self-evident, right? They exist in every world where the laws of logic
yeah,
exist, where they're true.
yeah, yeah. In fact, to say a possible world, actually, what makes a world possible in the first place is the fact that it doesn't break any of the laws of logic, right?
Yeah, I think so, because that's the most fundamental level, right? We have you are good. There are the three levels, right? So there's at least three levels. There are the logical, actually there's four. There's logically possible worlds. So these are worlds that are defined. It's any world where the 3 to 4 fundamental laws of logic are true. Then below that, there's a subset of worlds which are called the metaphysically possible worlds or feasible worlds, right? So it's where the laws of logic are true, plus any metaphysical principles. I think you appeal to something like the principle of sufficient reason, which is not a logical law, a law of logic. No, in your
No,
video,
no,
didn't you
no.
give
The
that
one
example?
example I gave of a metaphysical law that is not a law of logic is the example that nothing cannot come from not something. It is impossible that something comes from nothing, right? If you don't have anything, it's impossible that something pops out of it or something like that, right? I think that
Okay.
sounds like it doesn't sound like it's not a logical contradiction, but it sounds like impossible in a very strong way, right? So you say one
Yeah.
says this is metaphysically impossible. That's what people like William Lane Craig says, but it's not a real logical contradiction to say
Right.
something popped out of nothing. That's not a logical contradiction in the strong sense, right?
Yeah. So I'm just saying. So that's again, it's the same thing. The principle of sufficient reason is an explanatory principle. It explains why you have this principle that it's impossible for something to come from nothing, kind of thing, right? So anyways, let's go with that. So in order to be metaphysically possible, you have to exist. The laws of logic need to be true, and in this world, all the metaphysical principles are true, and yet you can still exist in that world. So that's what it means to be metaphysically possible. Then there's the physically possible worlds, right? So the multiverse and all of our laws of physics, and that can include where the laws of physics maybe are different and stuff like that. So you could say there's the physically possible worlds, as long as the laws of physics, the laws of logic, metaphysical principles, plus the laws of nature as we know them obtain, then that means you're physically possible. And then finally, we come to the actual world, which is we are factually possible. Given the facts of this world, I exist, right? I exist in this entire set. Um, so, yeah, I'm factually possible in this world. In fact, I actually exist. So, no, you don't get it.
I'm not sure we speak about. I mean, this pen exists, so it's factually possible. I mean, I'm not. I never heard of that. I mean, what? I mean, once it exists, right? What? What's the point of talking about whether it's possible or not, right? Seems to me like
Well, because
oh,
we could travel back in time before it did
okay,
exist, and say it was still factually possible, given all the facts, kind of thing. That in
okay,
this universe, yeah.
okay,
But okay, so
okay,
sticking with the logically possible, right? So all that the real maximum great being has to be, given the definition of it, it has to be consistent with the 3 or 4 fundamental laws of logic. That's all we have to do to prove that it is logically possible. Okay, and or in terms of logical necessity, that it exists in every single world where the laws of logic obtain, kind of thing. Okay, so that's what we're trying to prove.
yeah,
So in the first place, it's defined. Let's start with in terms of necessity, right? Part of the definition of a real maximum great being is that it is just defined as being necessary. And you've already said there's no problem, there's no incoherence with that, because the laws of logic themselves are obviously necessary. So is there a problem inherently with something existing in every world where the laws of logic obtain? Like, do the laws of logic somehow, prevent someone from existing?
No. I mean, what I don't get is like, what could account for that? I mean, I think it's logically possible, but I'm not sure it's like metaphysically possible, right? But I mean, it's like in every possible world where the laws of logic, I mean, in every possible world, like every possible way the world could have been, or a world could be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing exists in every single one. I mean, it's like if I what stops me from saying, I mean, okay, there is one. I can imagine one where this thing doesn't exist, right? So because I can imagine that, it cannot be necessary, right? I mean, that's like the parody. I mean,
Well, so if I'm understanding, it's not that the laws of logic prevent a real maximum great being from existing. There's some kind of it's metaphysically impossible. And since all the metaphysical worlds are a subset of all the logical possible worlds, that means there's at least one logically and metaphysical possible world where the real maximum great being doesn't exist. So again, I would just ask, what are the metaphysical principles of that world that prevent my definition of a real maximum great being exists? What is it that prevents a being with knowledge, power, and benevolence to the maximal compossible degree from existing in that world? What is it that contradicts that or contravenes that?
it's the fact that I defined that world to be one where the thing doesn't exist. For example, I mean, we're analyzing whether a necessary being, whether that concept makes sense, right? So we cannot say, oh, well, it is necessary. So we're analyzing whether is this necessary being X, does that make sense? Is it possible that this just has to exist in every possible world? And then what I think of it is, okay, but I can imagine one world where the entire world is just a tree, for example, or something, or it's just a rock, right? I can't like conceive of that world, right? So then, therefore, because I conceive that world, it is false that there is something that has to exist in all possible worlds, right?
Okay. So you're leaning upon the a priori evidence, the properly based belief from your modal evaluating faculties, and you're saying to you, I can conceive of at least one possible world where a real maximum great being is not there, the laws of logic are there, and there's just a rock exists, kind of thing.
Yeah, that seems logically possible, right? If we are a priori, right? Like before, like it depends on who defines his thing first. For if I start by defining that world, then okay, then that will make a necessary being impossible, right? That's what I'm talking about. But if you begin by defining a necessary being, okay, that makes my world impossible because now your being has to exist in my world, right? But it just depends. It depends on how you start in a way. It feels weird.
I get what you're trying to do, but the problem is there is a symmetry breaker here that you're not recognizing, and it's what is the source of warrant with a real maximum great being? We have a source of warrant, whereas with your rock world there is no there's no objective warrant. Let's put it that way, because you're claiming to have a properly based belief, so I can't get inside your head and see if that's true or you're deluding yourself. So that I'll just say I don't have that kind of thing. But here's something that is objective. The real maximum great being is self-evidently true. The possibility of a real maximum, because it's in the definition. When you see the definition being defined, right? His traits are logically possible. just they're defined that way, right? This isn't saying like Alvin Plantinga, I'm not necessarily getting into the omniscience, omnipotence, because you could say, I think those are logically possible too, but a skeptic could come and say, oh, well, omniscience, that's logically impossible because I can point to this or that paradox. But Yujin Nagasawa's top-down approach, he's just saying, okay, forget about that. Maybe omniscience is impossible. I don't know. I'm not going to get there. I'm just saying whatever is the maximal logically possible degree of knowledge, propositional knowledge, this guy has that. Maximal logically possible degree of power, this guy has that. And same with benevolence. So it's inherent in the definition. It's true. It's just self-evidently true. He can't not exist. So your rock world is canceled out via the self-evidence of the truth of my real maximum great being. Does that make sense? Like maybe, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good move. It's defined. Is saying, okay, I'm not going to say it's omnipotent, right? Because that maybe get me to some paradoxes, and then I will have to spend time defending that, right? I'm just going to say the maximally like coherent amount of power, right? And then I will avoid, without necessarily saying it's omnipotent, and that will avoid that part, right? So I think that's fine. I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah. So given we have objective self-evidence, right? The possibility premise for a real maximum great being, it's true by definition. It's a tautology, literally. And then on the other hand, you're saying, well, I have a properly basic belief that this real maximum great being doesn't exist in one world. There's this one world with a rock. I think if you're being truthful, you would say the warrant from the tautology is way stronger than the rock world. Because I'm not sure if you would you claim a 100% degree of warrant that there is this rock, 100% there is a world where real maximum great being doesn't exist, the laws of logic are there, and there's just a rock with it.
Remember, we are not saying yes, it is a possible. Remember, of course not. If you say there is a possible world where this necessary being doesn't exist, then again, if it's necessary, then maybe not, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if a priori there is a world, if you start from the beginning, remember we are thinking where it is possible. We're just trying to conceive it is possible, right?
Yeah.
Just like you. So just from the beginning, is it possible that there is a world where only a rock exists? Like from the beginning, without thinking about necessary beings.
Yeah.
And you think about it like it doesn't entail any contradiction. So I will have to say, yes, it is possible that a world with a rock exists, right?
Okay. I get what you're doing, and I'm trying to do that. I'm treating them basically, you're trying to say there's symmetry here, so it serves as a canceling out parity, and I'm saying that's not the case. There's a symmetry break. There's an asymmetry. So no. So here's what I would say. So let's take, we have the possibility premise on the left side. Real maximum great being is possible, right? And we have its definition kind of thing. And then on the other hand, we have, laws of logic and a rock world. And you're saying, well, why should we think one is possible or not, kind of thing, or that they're both equally possible? And by possibility, we're talking about our knowledge that it's ontologically possible, not just epistemically, right? So we're not
logically possible.
Correct. Yeah. So logic, but ontologically it covers logical, metaphysical. It's all ontology, right? So, but great. So why should I favor one over the other, or are they just equal? You're saying, well, we can favor the rock world because there's I personally have subjective evidence from a properly basic belief. I can imagine this. I can conceive of this world. That means it's possible. And
I would say there is no contradiction involved in the rock existing alone with the laws of logic, so that's why it's possible. That would be my justification. Just that the fact that there is no contradiction involved in it.
But there is, right? So again, the whole So I'll get to that, but number one, the way it's designed as a canceling out parity, that it's designed to, it contradicts the real maximum great being, right? So that both can't be true. That's why it works as a canceling out parity. And I'm saying as an asymmetry breaker, the only reason you would favor your rock world is because you're saying, well, I can imagine that kind of thing, right? And what I would say is I want to undermine your a priori basis and say, but you can also imagine the real maximum great being as well. So for you don't actually have warrant. You don't have a properly basic belief. You're just relying on mere imagination, and our finite imaginations can be wrong if we're not envisioning things properly. And that's evident in your case because you are imagining contradictory things. A real maximum great being that's exists in one world and is necessary, meaning it exists in all worlds, but yet you're also imagining a world where this being doesn't exist in all worlds because it's absent from this world. So that's a broad contradiction. He exists in all worlds, but he doesn't exist in at least one world. So that I would just, that's my first step, is to undermine you don't actually have warrant via your modal evaluating faculties. They're malfunctioning for some reason. Does that make sense? Or
yeah, but it seems like you're saying that your symmetry breaker is the fact that my word contradicts yours. Like,
no.
Why couldn't I do the same? And I say, no, your necessary being is logically wrong because one can imagine worlds where this being doesn't exist.
Cool.
I mean,
that's a great question. You are absolutely correct. You spunky little damn. You're right. So this could, even if you can't prove that the rock only world is true, I've proven your modal. You're messed up. Sin has affected your modal evaluating faculties. But you're like, but it's, even if it's just equally probable, if we have no evidence, then it still functions as a canceling out parity. So Dale, you've got to provide your own asymmetry breaker. So there's two ways to do that. So you can appeal to objective arguments and evidence, and try to prove there's a contradiction there, or we can do the Yujin Nagasawa top-down way. So let's start with the objective evidence. So I would just say it is impossible, metaphysically impossible, for there to be a world where just the laws of logic obtain and a rock obtains. By necessity, there would have to be certain metaphysical principles. There would have to be certain physical laws and principles to govern rocks, which are physical objects and stuff like that. So there would need to be other things existing in this world. It couldn't just be the laws of logic in a rock existing alone. A rock requires space. Is there space in this world?
Yeah, I could just add the fact that the space that the rock occupies and the laws that describe how the world or the rock functions, maybe that does exist as well. I could add that, but
Okay.
I don't think that's a huge problem, right?
Okay. So obviously we're gonna get into the situation where it's back and forth. Like, I'm gonna come up with an objection, you're gonna modify and stuff like that. But okay, so let me go to the game changer then. So this is where the top-down Yujin Nagasawa argument thinks. This is what I was appealing to. My reason for proving that the real maximum great being world is possible, and your modified rock world is not, without the real maximum great being, is through the self-evidence. That's my way of obtaining warrant. And again, if you bring up my slides, you can just see what the definition. It's the logical possibility. Oh, no problem. The logical possibility is just inherent in this, in the three properties it has. Now, and again, logical necessity, we both agree there's nothing about the laws of logic which would prevent that from being logically possible. So maybe I posit he's also got the property of being personal. Is that logically impossible for some reason, or is that not logically possible? Why couldn't there be a necessary personal being that has these three properties?
Right now, I don't. It doesn't seem to be a logical contradiction involved on it.
Is it a metaphysical contradiction in any way? Or
Maybe there is a metaphysical. Like for me, I think there is nothing that can account for why a thing will be necessary. Like it seems like why would that be the case? It doesn't. I don't really get it why. And I think maybe there is something that accounts for why a thing is necessary in this world, right? Maybe there is something in the world that makes a thing be necessary, but it will only be necessary in that world. But maybe another world will be different, right? So I'm not sure if there is like that's metaphysically coherent to say
yeah,
that.
but that would be a different type of necessity. That wouldn't be if you're logically necessary. Remember that what that means. It means you exist in possible world semantics. You exist in every world where the laws of logic are true. That's just what it means to be logically necessary. So you couldn't be logically necessary in only one world unless the laws of logic are only true in a single world. And that's obviously not the case. We both agreed. No,
right. I think I mentioned something like that in my video. But isn't this like saying that there is a fourth law of logic in addition to the three that says this being has to exist? Isn't because that's like the only way for a thing to be logically necessary is for its negation to entail a contradiction or a denial of the other three laws of logic, or there has to be an extra law of logic that says, okay, this thing has to exist, right? But there is no such a law, right? And there is no such a law in another world either, right? So that's why. How could something be logically necessary? I think how could something concrete be logically necessary? I don't see why, unless its negation entails a contradiction. I don't see how a concrete being could be logically necessary. It just doesn't make much sense to me.
So I disagree. I saw that in your video, and so you are absolutely correct that that's nonsense. Saying that there's a fifth, you called it a fourth, but I'm including the laws of inference as a fourth logical law. So there are four fundamental laws of logic. There is no fifth law of, there's a fifth logical law saying that a real maximum great being has to exist. That's no. But there is a necessary connection given that can be inferred from the laws of logic that we have, right? Things like the law of identity, logical law of non-contradiction, and stuff will apply because what is God, right? How the laws of logic, it's impossible for them to just exist abstractly. I think even as an atheist, you would agree. Unless you're a Platonist or something, like what does it mean for a number to just exist or for the law of logic to just exist? These aren't things that exist. They're not substances, they're not property things, and they're not heaps, which in mereology, the study of mereology, parts and wholes, there are only three types of things that can exist, that exhibit the relation, the belonging relation, which is existence. Existence is a relation. It's not a property, right? So only things.
Oh, that's very hard. That's very tricky. I'm a nominalist, so I actually don't think that abstract numbers exist. But that's a very tricky question. What you're saying is existence a relation?
Gotcha. So so it's even trickier for you, right? Because I'm saying that the laws of logic are true, and you're agreeing with me as a nominalist, which is a bit weird, but you're agreeing these things are transcendent. They exist in multiple logically possible worlds. So they have to exist somehow. If they're not things, they need to exist in a thing. And that's where God comes in. He is the grounding of all of the laws of logic. It's his logical nature, which grounds the logical law of non-contradiction, which grounds the logical law of identity and the law of excluded middle. They can't exist unless God exists. So that's why there's a necessary entailment.
Hold on. I mean, this gets off topic a little bit, but you say that his logical nature is what makes the laws of logic exist. Okay, but what does it mean to be logical. What does the word logical in his logical nature even means? Because normally for something to be logical is to be coherent with the laws of logic. But you're saying that's the opposite. Is the logical nature what makes the laws of logic? So it's like putting the cart before the, how was the expression, whatever,
But
it doesn't make
it's
sense.
not, because it just terminates at God, right? Like God doesn't allow for logically contradictory things to exist. That can't exist. He can't create a rock too big for him to lift. So
Why
that's
not?
where the law of non-contradiction, because it's just impossible. He can't do it. And
But why is it impossible?
because it doesn't, you can't do it logically.
Why not?
It violates God's logical nature. And you have the same question if you posit as a Platonist, which is, again, you're anomalous, so you're contradicting yourself like crazy here. But if you want to pretend to be a Platonist for a second, well, what is it makes the logical law of non-contradiction what they are? Why is that logical? Why isn't there a logical law of contradiction? Why isn't there a logical law of non-identity? Like why are the laws what they are and stuff like that? Like that's what you're asking me. And it's just out of necessity. This is the way God is, and his nature is what grounds the laws of logic and the way it works, just like the laws of morality. It's grounded in his moral nature. That's the terminus, that it is what it is kind of thing. And it's just by essence logical, and the opposite is illogical. Just like God's moral values are by essence good as opposed to bad. It's not good in light of comparing to some external standard and stuff like that, because then you're just going to why is adhering to that external standard, why is that logical, or why is that good? Why can't I do the opposite and stuff?
Yeah, we haven't talked about what I think is probably the most important part is the S5 axiom of logic.
Sure.
Because I have a unique approach to this. I don't agree with S5. I know that many philosophers agree with that, but I don't. I find it problematic. And there are some philosophers that also agree with me, like Josh Schmidt in one video responding to Trent Horn. He made a list of notable philosophers that disagree with S5, and it's not like super crazy in philosophy, like only a fringe thing. No, there are some people that disagree with that. So what is the justification? The idea the S5 action says if something is possibly necessary, okay, then it's necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just the idea. And it's just, so what is the justification for that? Because I mean, to say that, what does it mean to say that something is possible? For example, if I say it is possible that this coin will fall heads, I'm not saying that it's certain to fall heads. It means it could fall heads or tails. It could go either way. That's kind of what it means. It conveys to say that it's possible. So if I say it is possible that something is necessary, again, that's not the normal word of possible. It just means that it could be or it could also not be. But if you say no, if you say it's possibly necessary, then it is. It seems like it's using the word possible in a strange way. You know what I'm getting at?
I do, but again, so we have to remember. Can you just show my slides? Actually, oh shoot, let me, because I have the actual proofs. As you can see, I took a lot of screenshots here.
Yeah, I see that. That's cool.
What's going on here? All right, hang on. Let me just see what slide it's on.
Yeah, it's okay.
36. Okay, so these are the logical proofs. 100%. It's like denying 1 + 1 = 2 if you deny the validity of axiom S5 here, right? And I get what you're saying about the weirdness, but think it through. It's saying it'll reduce to contradiction if you see it, right? Because so it's possibly logically necessary. Remember, what does logically necessary mean? Remember, it means, okay, in every single possible world where the laws of logic obtain, that thing is in that world with the laws of logic. So that's just what logically necessary means. So if you're saying, well, it's possible for something, there's a possible at least one possible world where something has the property of existing in every possible world where the laws of logic obtain. From there, it follows, okay, well, then you do exist in every world where the laws of logic obtain. And that includes the actual world, because the actual world, the logical law of non-contradiction applies in this world, and the logical law of identity applies in this world. So, and to say otherwise is just, it leads to contradictions. It's a reductio ad absurdum. Now, that said, I did come with a little bit of a trick, because Axiom S5, most philosophers and modal logicians accept this. This is not controversial among most logicians. However, there are some who deny it. Great. Well, how about the ones that are not controversial at all? Because you can get to the exact premise 3 is proven not just with Axiom S5, but it's proven with Axiom S4, which is not controversial, plus Axiom B and modal logic. And that will give you the exact same thing. And again, here's the logical proof. So if you don't like Axiom S5, then you can get the same premise from Axiom S4 plus Axiom B. And therefore the premise is true. It's kind of thing. And again, these are the logical proofs and that sort of thing in symbolic logic. But so yeah, like we can get there through multiple means. But even just looking at Axiom S5, it's again a tautology. It's once you understand what it's saying, it's just self-evidently true. To think otherwise ends in contradiction.
Okay. Yeah, I will have to look how does that. I will have to read it carefully. I don't remember. I do know how to read this, but not exact. I cannot do it quickly. Can you maybe explain it? The one of the S4 and B in normal language. Do you know how that works?
I do. All right, so Axiom B. Whatever is the case is necessarily possible. So it's arguing that's Axiom B, and then where's S4?
Yeah, that's whatever is the case is necessarily possible. That's correct.
Okay, and whatever S4, whatever is necessary is necessarily necessary.
Okay, that's
and then it works through from those axioms, you can reason through this reductio ad absurdum to prove the principle that whatever is possibly necessary is in fact necessary. And again, in normal language, the way I talked that out. So this way is kind of, it's almost like reverse engineering it from backwards kind of thing, right? So from positing its actual existence and stuff like that. But here's the way. So if it's possibly necessary, so that, do you remember what is the definition of being logically necessary? In modal logic, what does that mean? The definition, do you remember?
It means you have to exist, or it has to be true.
Well, okay, has to be true given what, though? What else?
What is the definition of being logically, if we are talking about a proposition or a concrete being?
Both. It doesn't matter which. I don't see a distinction.
A proposition is necessary if it just has to be true, right?
So no. Okay. So basically, when you're necessary, it means that you are true if you're a proposition, or if you're a thing, you exist in every possible world where the laws of logic obtain, where the laws of logic are true. That's what it means to be logically necessary. Because again, it's the laws of logic. They entail that you will exist in one way or another. If those fundamental laws are true in a world, that guarantees, it's a conditional statement. If the laws of logic are true, then that proposition is true, or that thing exists in that same world. That's the property of being logically necessary in modal terms. Does that make sense so far, the definition?
Yeah, but the reason for that is because, I mean, that's the definition according to S5. It's because all possible worlds look at each other in S5 and can reference each other. But I don't agree with that. For example, I think that, I mean, it is like that because of S5.
All possible worlds reference each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah, reference each other, can see each other, or something like that.
So are you denying what's called trans world identity? Maybe that was
sure.
because that was my issue with your Mr. Cloner parody, right? Because it violates the logical law of identity. The clones are not identical. They don't have trans world identity with Mr. Cloner proper in the original world.
Yeah,
they have different properties. So, yeah.
You can say you can say they are qualitatively different, and it doesn't matter. I could have said he creates sons of him, right? If he exists in a world, he creates children in other worlds. It doesn't matter if they are clones of himself, for example. And it's still, so there is a child of him in this world, right? It will still work. It doesn't really matter if they are identical to him or not.
Okay, but in order for the whole point of this argument is trying to get that God actually exists, right? So it depends on this thing called trans world identity, that it's the same identical being, this real maximum grade being, exists in all of the other logically possible worlds. If you have Mr. Cloner in one logically possible world and then the child of Mr. Cloner, those are not identical. Those are different beings, and therefore you can't claim Mr. Cloner is logically necessary. He only exists in one world. It's a bunch of children in the other world.
Yeah, what would be logically necessary are the children. Those will be the logically necessary things.
Is it the same child in every single world?
I mean, you're talking about their intrinsic properties are the same?
Yeah. The law of identity.
Yeah. No, the intrinsic, they would be qualitatively different. Obviously, the one world will be a different child, but it will have the same intrinsic properties.
Some intrinsic properties.
Intrinsic, for example, if there is a black sphere.
Oh, yeah.
Let's say there are two black spheres. They only refer each other. They are identical in intrinsic properties like mass and color and whatever. But they are different. There are two of them because they are different locations. So you say they're qualitatively different. They're not the same being. Like To
keep it simple. I know you as an atheist disagree with this, but just to keep it simple for the audience so they can understand. Let's pretend those intrinsic properties are the soul. Like that's the same thing exists in all of the different logically possible worlds, is what you're saying. That soul of the child. And again, I know you don't believe in souls, but just to keep it simple, that's what you're saying. It's that same soul in every world where Mr. Cloner creates that child kind of thing. Is it different souls? There's the soul of child Bob, and then there's the soul of child Jim or something in world number 3.
No, it's different. It will be different souls, I think.
Okay.
In each world, each one needs to have a soul. One soul cannot exist in different, or I don't know if it can. It can.
I think it can. That's the thesis of trans-world identity, and this ontological argument depends on that to be true in order to work for God. Because if trans-world identity is denied, then you have different. It's Yahweh 1 in this world, Yahweh 2 in another world. They're different beings. They're different souls. I believe God's a soul. So, so trans-world identity is something that needs to be argued for this modal ontological argument to work as well. And I didn't prepare for that, but I did back in the day. Alvin Plantinga, in his book on the nature of necessity, has an entire chapter proving that trans-world identity is true. But I think the only way trans-world identity could work is through the modal evaluating faculties, but you have to believe in the soul in order for it to work. And I appeal to things like NDEs and stuff in different different possible worlds to prove that. But for an atheist, if you're just we don't have a soul, we're just a physical body, then I would need to think how I would convince you of trans-world identity. Yeah. But yeah, so that's good. So are you saying you officially deny that the trans-world identity thesis?
No, I'm not. It's not clear to me really what does trans-world identity really, what is meant by that. I have to look it up also. I don't get what you're really saying. Yeah.
No problem. We'll move on then. So, but yeah, all right. So yeah, that in terms of your Mr. Cloner thing, that this is why it utterly fails, and it is. If you're saying it's different, number one, it's a child, so it's different from Mr. Cloner. So Mr. Cloner exists in one world where the laws of logic obtain, and his child exists in a totally different world. And then he has different children in all the other possible worlds where the laws of logic obtain. So that's not logical necessity. The same person, Mr. Cloner, has to exist in every world. There are no children. There's just Mr. Cloner. The same soul, the same person, the same identity has to exist in every single world where the laws of logic.
The same intrinsic properties. I think that will say like that, intrinsic properties.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. What?
I will say, the same intrinsic properties, like whatever characterizes like my soul or myself, like my memories, my personality or whatever. Yeah, those will be the same in every possible world, for example. Posit that.
Okay, so it is the same. So it's not a child. It's Mr. Cloner.
No. It's the same child in all the possible worlds. The child, the same here and the same child in the other world.
The same child. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the problem is that they're still not logically necessary then, because the child's soul or intrinsic properties, as you're calling it, they exist in every single logically possible world except for the logically possible world where Mr. Cloner exists.
Oh no,
where
he makes one. He makes one in that world as well. He can make that in that world also.
Okay.
And all the other.
Okay. Well, then here's the thing. In order to be logically necessary, not only do you have to exist in every possible world where the laws of logic obtain, you have to exist at all times in that world when the laws of logic apply. The laws of logic are eternal. So if you're saying there's a time when Mr. Cloner creates the soul of his child, that means there is a time when it didn't exist.
Okay. I get it. I could say that the way Mr. Cloner makes those childs is analogous to the begetting act that God makes to the Son, which is eternal somehow, which is causation, but also somehow eternal.
But then but then they have different properties. They have different identities, because just like Jesus and God have different identities, they're different persons. Jesus has the property of being begotten, even though it's an eternal begetting, and God the Father has the property of being unbegotten. So they're not identical, and therefore they're not. It's not logical necessity. Like the child is still different. He has different properties.
Yeah, of course. The child is different from Mr. Cloner. That's fine. Well, just trying to show that the child is necessary.
Okay, but I can't point to a time then if you're saying it's a timeless begetting, but it's still, Mr. Cloner has a different property. He's logically prior to these people. I guess you would have to say the child is logically necessary then. You've got such a weird scenario here, but okay. It's just weird kind of thing. So I don't know. Clearly Jesus is logically necessary, even though he was eternally begotten. So here's the Trinity messing it up for me a bit, but I'm trying to. Can it continue? So Mr. Cloner is contingent. Can a contingent being create? I don't know. I'll just think about it then. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Can a contingent being create a necessary being? You're right about that, right? Because I'm not saying Mr. Cloner. You're right. I think that's a good point. Because the Mr. Cloner will be contingent. There are worlds where he doesn't exist, but how could he account for a necessary being,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
No, I don't think that analogy is good. I think there is a stronger defeater for my analogy. Actually, you could say that the act is incoherent. The act of cloning yourself, you cannot do it. You cannot clone yourself in a possible world. You can only, because the possible worlds don't exist, right? So you can
Yeah,
only
yeah.
clone yourself in an actual world because you cannot perform an act in a possible world. That's a non-existent thing. So that
Yeah.
I think that analogy doesn't work. I actually don't even think that the parody works anymore. I think the one with the lion is better.
Well, here's something I did want to ask you about, though, because even with all of these necessarily things, remember I said there were two things that are successful because a lot of atheists kind of presume that the theist, once you modify stuff in order, if you can get a necessarily existent something other than God, you think, you see, you're just, I'm assuming you're going to say, well, that doesn't exist because you believe in God's aseity or something like that. But I said there's two ways to exist as a logically necessary thing. There are, so there's God. He's a logically necessary independent being. He exists a se. He's the only thing that can exist a se. But there are also necessary, it's possible for necessary things to exist as logically necessary dependent, and therefore they're ultimately contingent, but they exist. They're logically necessary in that they exist. And so what do you think of the possibility that maybe some of these parodies are true, right? So the only example I can think, it's hard when you put in persons and stuff, because I don't think there were any eternal persons outside of the Trinity. But for example, if you put in numbers there, I'd be like, yeah, what's the problem? The ontological argument proves that numbers are logically necessary and they exist in every possible world. And guess what? But they're logically necessary dependent beings. They exist in God. They're thoughts in God's mind or something like that. So yeah, okay. So we can accept some of these parodies, at least some of them, and that's consistent with a real maximum great being existing. So just because you find a parody doesn't mean, it's contradictory with a real maximum great being.
Right. Yeah. I also say this in the video that parodying the argument is not exactly the same as showing where is wrong, and I would still like to show where does this go wrong, right?
Yeah.
I just recently read a good argument against this idea of divine conceptualism. I read it in Josh Smith's book of Existential Inertia. So do you think propositions are necessary? Like, take the possible propositions, all the possible propositions. Do you think that they exist in the form of thoughts of God?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that means there are some sentences and some propositions that are like really unholy or immoral or outrageous. I'm not going to give examples that will get me banned, but imagine something like, I don't know, I can think of are nasty stuff. Something really great, but you get the idea. Like something really horrible. You have to say, because that proposition exists, you have to say that God has that thought. And there are some of them that are like really unholy and are really immoral almost. So you're forced to say that God is thinking that, like that's horrible.
That's not a problem. All evil. I mean, the Bible's clear that evil has its ontological grounding in God. But that doesn't mean that he's evil, because there are different modes, right? So there's I think evil exists in God eternally, even without creation. All evil exists in God in potential form. It's only once it becomes actualized that would be an issue. Then I would say, he's an immoral God. So in terms of having bad thoughts, here's a bad thought. I'm sure there's a thought in God's head that Apologia is a smart skeptic. Very bad, very untrue, right? So take that, Apologia, but hopefully you'll be memed for that. But anyways, there are these bad thoughts. They exist in God's mind. They couldn't exist. We couldn't have them unless they exist in God's mind. But that doesn't mean they're conscious thoughts on God's mind. They could be subconscious, and that's fine.
You say there were thoughts, and thoughts have to be conscious, right? There are
we have subconscious thoughts.
But I don't think does God have a subconscious in the way that we do? I don't think that's the case. I think
he do. That's how I explain the incarnation. How
Really?
how do we explain? How do we explain? There are certain propositions that Jesus doesn't know. In fact, only God the Father, even the Holy Spirit, doesn't know. Right? But they're all God. They're all omniscient. So there's the omniscience can take on two forms: subconscious omniscience or conscious omniscience. And that's why when Jesus says, "I don't know when the end is going to come. I have no idea what day. Only the Father knows that." He's not saying he doesn't have the proposition in his head. He's saying I don't have conscious access to it. I'm not cognizant of it by choice. I could if I choose to, but for whatever reason, the Holy Spirit and God the Son have chosen to relegate that to their subconscious mind. So they're not consciously aware. Only God the Father is. And that's how I explain that part of the incarnation.
Okay, we're getting off topic here, but I think it is
it's fun, though.
I think it is a fundamental part of the definition of knowledge that one has conscious access to that thing that is known. If you don't have conscious access, well, then you don't know the thing, right? And if I have something access to it, like in a book or something, that's not the same as me knowing that thing. I have access to the knowledge, but I don't know it. So for me, that just doesn't work. But yeah, okay, that's something.
Well, so it depends on your definition of knowledge, right? Externalist versus internalism debate here. And obviously, one can have a warranted true belief and not be conscious of it and that sort of thing, right? So you know that Phil Bear plays the guitar, but before I just met, okay, well, you know that Tavo Sanabri is leaning towards Christianity, right? You knew that, didn't? Okay, but until I just mentioned it right now, you were not consciously aware or thinking that about, oh, Tavo, yeah, he's leaning towards Christianity. That was in your unconscious mind, but you still had that knowledge.
Okay, I get it now. Yeah. Okay, I see what you mean. Like you're not like thinking of it, right? Having that, but when Jesus say, "Well, I don't know where the time it is," like it means now he's thinking of it and he doesn't know. You know what I mean? It's like it's not the same.
He has the power. That's how powerful he is. He can control his subconscious, right? And he can prevent it from coming from his conscious mind from gaining access to it. Whereas it's hard for us to control. When somebody says, don't think about the pink elephant. Well, shoot, I'm thinking about a pink elephant. I tried to.
Yeah. Oh, I get it now.
But God, he could perfectly control that.
Oh, I get it now. Right. Like it would maybe he can. He could like lift his knowing that if he wanted to,
if he wanted to, yeah, he has the power because obviously, yeah.
Okay, I know what you're getting at in a way. Yeah, like it will still be on his brain somehow, some form. Yeah, okay, I get what you. Now I get what you mean. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, this is great. Hopefully, are you enjoying the convo? Hopefully,
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's very fun. Yeah. But there is something that about possible worlds that I just don't get it. Like, okay, possible worlds don't really exist, right? That's obvious.
They exist, but they're not concrete things that exist in the world. Yeah,
like they're not like the multiverse, like alternative universes in Marvel.
Yeah, they're not in. The way to say it is they're not necessarily actualized, right?
Right.
This is the only world we know of that actually exists, kind of thing, as opposed to just existing abstractly or as a thought in the mind of God.
Right. So to say there is a possible world where this pen exists, that's not saying that there is another reality where this pen exists, like this reality is like actual. That's just another way to word the proposition. It is possible. It is logically possible that this thing exists, right? That's just the same, just the exact same proposition. It's just being worded in a different way, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. So a good way. Now we only assume that this is the only logically possible world that's been actualized. Maybe God actualized. Let's say there's a set. Just to keep things simple, there's this abstract. There's a logically possible world where I have brown hair, another where I have red hair, and another where I have purple hair. We know for a fact God actualized the possible world where I have brown hair. maybe it's possible for all we don't know, but maybe God also actualized the world where I have red hair. But God forbid, he's not so evil. He would never create a world. He would never actualize the world where I have purple hair, or something like that. So maybe there are maybe two of the logically possible worlds have been actualized. Maybe not. We don't know, but we know at least this one was actualized.
Right. We could we could say there is instead of saying there is a possible world where a necessary being exists, where or maximally great being, we could simply word this as, well, it is possible that a maximally great being exists, right? It is possible that it exists, it's logically possible, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You, why can't you get from that proposition to, okay, well, then it exists in this world? I mean, why isn't there like obvious? If one proposition is the reward, is merely, if this proposition is merely the rewarding, if the possible words thing is just the same proposition being worded in a different way, shouldn't we be able to get from this, it is possible that a necessary being exists, to, okay, now it has to exist? Because it doesn't seem to me like the connection is not obvious. Do you want to show any slides?
Yeah. So I think this is your Bob parody, right? Is that correct? Like it's
Yeah,
possible.
yeah.
I think you said it's possible Bob exists, therefore he exists.
Okay.
Is that correct?
No, I don't. No, I don't think that's what I say. Yeah, yeah. Look, Bob is a being such as, if it's possible that he exists, then he actually exists.
Yeah. So that's what I just said. So yeah. So this is totally disanalogous, right? Because number one, you're not using the same argument. Where's axiom S5? There's no mention of the property of logical necessity here, and that's why you can't connect the dots. It's just an invalid argument, right? So all you're saying is that it is logically possible Bob exists. Okay, cool. So you're absolutely right. Right. My grandpa's name was Bob. He existed. I can tell you, he existed in this world, and this world is a one of the many logically possible worlds out there, kind of thing, right? But in terms of Bob Bob number five or something like that. So he's not my grandpa. Maybe Bob number five exists in a logically possible world, the world where I have purple hair, a world that God didn't actualize. Just because it's possible he exists in that world, doesn't mean he exists in this actual world or a world that God brought into concrete existence. No, he just, all this premise says is that he exists at least in one abstract or conceptual world, right? The proposition Bob number five exists is true in a set of other propositions that are true or false relative to this world, but there's nothing about that meaning he actually exists in our world. Like you just can't connect those logical dots. It's invalid.
I mean, what will be connecting them is the definition of Bob. The definition of Bob is such as that if it is possible that he exists, then he does, right? So you have an if P, then Q, right? Then you have P because it is not a contradiction, so you will have Q. That would be the connection there.
Gotcha. Okay. So on that front, I just deny the possibility premise. What proof do we have? Like with my possibility premise, I gave the proof of self-evidence for the real maximally great being. And other philosophers give their own arguments for the truth of the possibility premise. But there's nothing about Bob, this random Bob or whatever, that entails, sorry, that, oh shoot, I can't. Can you read? This is just defining Bob.
Yeah, I'm just defining Bob, right? Can you?
Oh yeah. So here's what I said. So the conditional statement, you have to prove that the conditional statement is true, right? So if it is possible Bob exists, then Bob actually exists, right? This is the conditional statement.
Right.
But we have no reason to think that this is true. And in fact,
that's the definition of Bob. That's how I define Bob, right?
If you defined Bob, okay,
like
well, Then I
So
would,
it's a being that fulfills that conditional statement. That's just the definition of Bob.
okay, and who? Yeah, but it's just it doesn't. I don't think it's possible. Like, what is it about his possible existence that entails? Like, how do you prove his possible existence entails that, right? Because I'm evaluating the definition, the ontological possibility of the definition itself here, and I'm just saying that doesn't sound logically possible to me.
No, you have to show where is the contradiction, right? If you're going to say that is logically impossible, you have to show a contradiction involved somehow in the definition.
No, you have to prove the premise that somehow his possible existence can plausibly entail his actual existence. And on that front, if you just put it in terms of a simple conditional, this is what philosophers use. It's called a truth table, right? And you can see what you're saying. Let's say it's true that it's possible Bob exists. It's still logically possible for the consequent to be false, that Bob actually exists, kind of thing. So therefore, there is this. This is a false conditional statement, and the burden of proof is on you. If you're saying, well, it's just definitional that if he's possible, Bob has this property of if he's possibly exists, then he does exist, and that's how you're falsifying this as a possibility. This is a logical possibility for your conditional statement. Then I say, on the basis of what, though? Like what? What? If I'm evaluating, okay, is it possible that Bob exists? Bob, where he has this property of possible existence entailing his actual existence in the world, there's just no connection. That doesn't seem possible. That's not even logically possible for me, for somebody to have the property of existing possibly, and then that connecting to his existing actually. Like, there's no mechanism, I guess, to bring that about. And that's what I would need to assess the possibility of Bob.
But that's kind of exactly what I was saying at the beginning with the idea of a necessary concrete being, that it doesn't seem to me like there is any mechanism to bring about, to make something necessarily exist, right? That's that was also my objection with the whole necessity issue.
You're saying like the necessary existence itself is problematic to you.
Yeah, that's what I think at the beginning, right? It's not. I don't think it's it entails a logical contradiction, like straightforward logical contradiction. But I find it very strange, like metaphysically very weird and problematic.
Okay. But you said right at the beginning that you said you have no issue with logical necessity because, number one, the laws of logic themselves exist necessarily, and that's not a problem. So logical necessity isn't inherently incoherent or impossible, even according to you, right?
Well, I think maybe they are. I think maybe they are brute. Okay, wait, hold on. Is the law of non-contradiction like necessarily true? I mean, in a way, I think, yeah. I mean, it couldn't fail. It couldn't be false. It couldn't possibly be false, right? Or maybe that's I'm not sure if that's a brute fact or a necessary fact, or I don't know. Maybe I think it has to be true, right?
So maybe it's a tautology again, because again, logic. When you're saying logically necessary, when you say something's necessary, you have necessary in light of what? What's the type of necessity?
It has to be,
and we're talking logical, right? So, okay, what is logical? That includes the logical non-contradiction. So you're saying logical law of non-contradiction has to exist, given the logical law of non-contradiction exists. Yeah, it's a tautology. It can't be false. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. No, I mean, if what makes something necessary, for example, is that the fact that its negation will break the law of non-contradiction, then yeah, we cannot say, okay, you can ask, okay, but what makes the law of non-contradiction necessary? I will have to think about it. But I mean, I'm a nominalist. I don't think those laws exist. I just think that they are true. Yeah, is it necessarily true that a contradiction is always false? And I do think it is. And I actually, by the way, I think I have a different view on it. I think the reason for that is the is in the definition of the word "not." I think it somehow implies that the law of non-contradiction, but it's very difficult to prove, and most philosophers think that there is no way to prove it.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so sorry, I missed that. The definition of the word "not," you said?
Not, yeah, yeah.
Not. And what about that? Like,
It is involved in the law of non is the law of non-contradiction is a cannot be not a. I think what grounds that, what makes that true, is somehow the definition of the word "not." But I think,
oh yeah,
but
yeah,
it's difficult to prove.
yeah, because they're contradictory propositions and stuff like that, like
Yeah,
explicitly contradictory and stuff. But again, that can be obviously we phrase it simplistically in terms of what was the word? I just had it in my head. Strict logical contradictions. But there many times things are not strictly logically contradictory. They don't just, oh, I have hair and I don't have hair. Like the people don't do that. So that most of the time we have to look for broad logical contradictions, whereby once we understand, in light of the logical law of identity and the logical law of excluded middle and other perhaps metaphysical principles and stuff like that, that there are contradictions that are entailed from the two propositions being proposed or the two things being proposed. So we have to tease it out, the contradiction out sometimes. And
yeah,
the thing I want you to understand, though, it's not just the logical law of non-contradiction. It's also the logical law of identity. Like when we say that something's logically possible or necessary, you have to think in terms of the 3 to 4 laws of logic. How does something relate to those 3 to 4 laws of logic, not just how does it relate to the logical law of non-contradiction, because it's logically possible entails all of the laws of logic. Does
yeah.
that make sense? Yeah.
I guess so. Do you want to uh, ask get questions from the audience? Maybe I see some people in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah. So guys, yeah, ask some questions in the chat. I have to look at how to make the comments appear. But yeah, we'll
Custom destination there. Jeez.
yeah.
I,
But here's
I
the thing.
can't.
Okay, but
Go
let me
ahead.
see if I can. So let me see if I can try to put it into words. The way I think that you cannot move to a possible world to another one. It's like if there is to say that there is a possible world where the thing is necessary, you are almost saying that, okay, whether the thing is necessary or not depends on which world you are in, right? That's almost because if you put it in these words, okay, there is a possible world where this thing is necessary. It almost sounds like, okay, but there is another possible world where it isn't, right? Like if you're saying that it's just in a possible world where it's necessary, right? So okay, so in that world it was necessary, but maybe in other world it wasn't. But I know that the necessary there it implies logical necessity, and it's the same for all words, right? I understand that, but again, it just goes back to saying what I say. Just the only way to account for that will be for the to be a law of logic that makes it that says that this thing has to exist, right? What I mean for that, okay, let's say there's a property of the thing. The thing has the property of being necessary, okay, in all worlds, right? But that's just saying, okay, that's just saying that it exists, right? But what does it make sense to say, okay, there is a possible world where it has this property? Because again, it doesn't depend on the world, it's just a property of the thing. So what is the point of saying there is a world where the thing has this property? You know what I'm getting at? It has to work. It's difficult to word it. Like it doesn't depend on the world. So why did you say, okay, it's a possible world where the thing has the property? The thing simply has the property. You know what I'm saying?
The thing simply. I thought you were going back to the issue of transworld identity at first, right? As opposed to like counterpart theory, but now I'm not sure, not totally sure what you're asking. So like you're saying like are you saying how does it make sense for the same thing to exist in multiple possible worlds? It only exists in one possible world, or no, that's not you.
No, okay. We have some questions. What I'm saying is like it doesn't make sense to say there is a possible world where that thing is necessary, because remember that whether a thing
Oh,
is necessary
no.
or not, it doesn't depend of the world, right? So what does it mean to say there is a possible world where it is necessary, right? It seems like if the necessity is world independent, then why are you saying there is a possible world that where that thing is necessary? And we have some questions,
Uh,
so yeah, maybe we
I
can get
see
to
what
that.
you're
You
saying.
can answer what I say, and then we can look at them.
Gotcha. Yeah, I get what you're saying then. Like, so basically, it's because in that possible world. So again, logical necessity does depend on all of the logically possible worlds. It means you exist in every logically. That's a property that you possess. So how does it make sense to you for you to have the property of being logically necessary in a single world, right? So there you don't, obviously you're not enacting. It requires the existence of these other worlds, at least abstractly and conceptually. But it's just saying in that one possible world, you have the property of existing in all logically possible worlds. You still have that property, right? Because in all of those all of those possible worlds, whether actualized or not, whether you actually exist or not, doesn't matter. The proposition Dale exists would be true, or God exists would be true. So you are still existing in all of those possible worlds, either in actualized form or non-actualized form if you're contingent. Well, yeah, logically possible. Okay, you would include the actual world there. Does that make sense? So I
Yeah,
God in the actual world, he has the property of existing in all other logically possible worlds, which have including ones that have not been actualized.
yeah, okay. So here's a question from Dark of All Trades. He says, okay, like, why should we treat necessary existence as a great making property? Like, why is that? Yeah, why is that a great making property?
So notice in the argument I gave with Yujin Nagasawa and a real maximum great being, um, great this subjective judgment as to well which properties are great making or not, it's totally irrelevant because I'm just defining the real maximum great being as being having the property of necessary existence. Okay. Now, if you're giving Alvin Plantinga's version and you're saying, okay, a maximally great being, and this is a be that's defined as a being that has all of the great making properties to the max, all of the great making properties, including omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence. Um, so that does require this assessment of, well, why? Okay, logical necessity or logically necessary existence is posited to be a great making property there, and that requires this assessment, evaluational assessment of necessary existence is greater than contingent existence. And on that front, how do we get there? It's just this valuational judgment. I think it's almost self-evident. I mean, it is greater and better if your existence is guaranteed no matter what the circumstances. You can't fail to exist. You can't be killed. You exist at all times and in all places. And that's just greater than having a contingent existence and living for a finite period of time. I think 9 out of 10 people would have that same judgment, including Juan himself, who admitted in the video that necessary existence is greater than contingent existence. Do you agree with that one, or did I misunderstand you? Or?
No, I think that's okay. I mean, it seems like all things being equal, it kind of does seem like a being that exists necessarily is greater than a being that doesn't. I mean, it seems kind of intuitively correct. You're right.
Yeah. But just for the questioner, just again, just to clarify, so that the version that I gave from Yujin Nagasawa, a real maximally great being, it's almost a misnomer. Maximal great, there is no subjective judgment about necessary existence being greater than contingent existence. There is no evaluation on that level involved. I'm just defining. He has the property of necessary existence. So, yeah, really, I think Yujin Nagasawa. I know he was copying and modifying Alvin Plantinga, but maybe we should call it, I don't know, or something else instead of a real maximum great being. Just call it the real greatest. I don't know, the real God being or something. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So we have another question. Like you say, like most atheists deny or question the premise number one. So here's the question: we don't have independent justification that a necessary existing being is even possible. So how can this be determined? How do you know that a necessary being is even possible, right?
That a necessary being is even possible. Well,
Yeah.
clearly there are aspects of our life like numbers and stuff like that, and the laws of logic that we all recognize are necessary. And if we do a conceptual analysis on them and try to figure out, well, how could they exist, and stuff like that, I believe it entails the truth of a logically necessary being.
Yeah, but
or
I mean,
thing.
those are abstract, and the other thing is concrete. So I think there's a huge difference there between abstractions and how do you know that a concrete necessary being is possible, right?
Yeah, but beings can exist in abstract form too, right? There are non-existent beings that exist in logically, like unicorns don't actually exist. They're beings, but they exist in a logically possible world. There's some possible worlds where they could have existed, kind of
I
thing.
mean, the concept of a of a unicorn is an abstract thing, but an unicorn itself, it will be a concrete being, right?
Yeah, but it's a being. So like, okay, so what's the question? The question has to do with concreteness then, like
No, how do we know that I would say here, I would say a concrete necessary being? How do we know that that is possible? How do we know that this is even possible in the first place?
a concrete necessary being. So, well, so I think the way you have to get there is number one, understand conceptually what it means to be logically necessary. So on that front, we have no problem, right? With the him being necessary, he exists in all logically possible worlds. And then the second step is okay, well, the actual world that exists concretely, and that's one of the set of logically possible, all of the logically possible worlds out there. So that means if God is existing in all logically possible worlds, that includes the actual world. So he must exist concretely. He's a really existing being. That's how the ontological argument. That's one of the few of the premises for the ontological argument there.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, but I'm not. Yeah, but that's just like the final step. That's saying, okay. I mean, in a possible world, God will also be in that world will be a concrete being, right? I mean, like
No, he
okay,
wouldn't be concrete.
no,
Okay. So I see what you're saying. So
yeah,
here, it's true in God's case, he is the grounding of logically possible worlds. So I would be opposite. It's not like logically possible worlds are above and then, oh, God exists within them. So that's true. There is some nuance here for me. Logically possible worlds are grounded in God. They're an intrinsic aspect of God. They are grounded in a couple things: God's causal potential, right? Because God could have created this world versus this world, and that's what allows for causal potentiality, as we call them, possible worlds, and stuff, and also God's omniscience and stuff, his knowledge of his causal potentials and their entailments. So I ground possible worlds in God, and that's something that's different from Juan and stuff. But the ontological argument, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't get into the question of what is the grounding of logically possible worlds. It's just we know that in under modal logic these things exist in a conceptual form, and from that we can prove that there is this being, a real maximally great being. From there you can then ask the question, well, what grounds logically possible worlds? And I think when you do that, you'll realize, yeah, it is actually grounded in God itself. It doesn't make sense to speak of possible worlds as abstract things that exist in their own right.
Yeah. Okay.
Am I boring? I can tell I'm
No,
boring.
no, no. No, I just signed. By the way, I saw somebody gave me a super chat. Thank you so much. I missed it. Shloshi Whale 91. Thank you so much for the super chat. Uh, yeah, I hadn't seen that before. Very grateful. So yeah,
What did they do? They gave
yeah,
you a super chat.
yeah.
Nice,
They gave
nice,
me,
awesome.
yeah, that's great. A lot of people today. I never had this many people. That's great. That's very good.
Oh, that's wicked. Awesome.
It's so
Yeah.
far that I cannot show them the comments like everyone does because I have a weird StreamYard connection. It's not connecting directly to YouTube. Maybe I'm going to look into OBS or some other streaming software because that's very sad.
Yeah, yeah. Because I like looking at the chat, but I
Yeah.
just see nothing. So
Okay. Let me. Oh, say there's another question from James.
Mhm.
So why does God have to think or act logical, and in particular use moral logic? Like even in this world, quantum physics makes that questionable.
so no, quantum physics operates consistently with logic. There's nothing illogical. There's no provable contradiction with the law of logical non-contradiction, for example. There, right? That's just an interpretation put on it by atheists and skeptics, physicists and stuff, right? It's not provable, and I've looked into this in great detail when I did my cosmological argument. But in terms of the first part of that question, why does God have to? There is no have to. There is no, oh, God's got a duty to act logical, but he could act illogical. No, it's just God is. His essence is logical, and that provides the foundation or the grounding for the what we call the laws of logic. It's just the laws of logic are just descriptions of God and his logical nature. So
But
it's not that he has to be that way. It is that he is by essence that way.
hold on. There is something there that I don't get. You're saying the laws of logic are a description of the fact that God's nature is logical. There is a tautology there that it seems to be like, what does that even mean? Because what does the word logical there mean? Logical means that is coherent with the laws of logic, right? Something is logical if it coheres with the laws of logic. You cannot then say that the laws of logic are what they are because they're based in a nature that is logical. That's like going in a circle that doesn't say no. The laws of logic are prior to something being logical. You cannot. They are not. It's not the opposite, right? I think so. He will be like an Euthyphro dilemma kind of situation. Is God logical because he thinks according to the correct laws of logic, or are those the laws of logic that are true because these are the ones that God thinks according to, right? So it's something that I don't get it. I don't really get what you're saying there when you say that
So
logic is
it's
grounded in.
because so it's grounded internally in God, right? But it's not grounded in his arbitrary will, as though God had the I can make the logical law of non-contradiction true, or I can make the logical law of contradiction true. I'm going to choose the former. It's not grounded in his arbitrary will. It's grounded in his logical nature, and that is what it is by essence. It's the same. You atheists have to answer that too. Why is the logical law of non-contradiction logical? You can't answer that. It's just that's what God is by essence. That is the essence of being logical, right? So God in his essence, before there ever was a law of logical non-contradiction, before anyone came up with that term, there was God, and he existed as a trinity. He couldn't do logically contradictory things. It violates his divine essence. He couldn't make there be, oh, well, there's 3 members of the Trinity, and actually there's 5 members of the Trinity. That's contradictory. That was impossible. He couldn't say, oh, you're identical to Jesus. I'm identical to God the Father, but guess what? I'm identical to Jesus too. That violates the logical law of identity and the logical law of non-contradiction. That just isn't possible to be a actualized state of affairs for God to bring about.
But
He
again,
couldn't be that way.
but
By
again,
essence, logical.
you're saying he couldn't. But the question is he if he's omnipotent, there is no account as for why he couldn't, because for normally what accounts for he not being able to do something is precisely the law of non-contradiction, because it violates the law of non-contradiction. But if if he's prior to the law, that would be saying that the law of non-contradiction governs God. It shows that this governs what God can do. So it cannot be that God is what grounds him. It's actually, in a way, the law of non-contradiction is like, it's above God. It governs what God can do in the first place. What is the account? You say he couldn't violate his essence, but why not? What makes it impossible for him to violate its essence, or whatever you wanted to word it as?
Because it's not a power for him to be able to choose to actualize or not. He couldn't choose to make there 3 and 5 members of the Trinity. That's just impossible for him to do. And that's it.
Why
it's not
impossible?
impossible, and it just is by essence. And that's what we call it's impossible because it's illogical, but it's not impossible because it just is. It's impossible. Let's say it that way, okay? And then we come along after the fact and say, oh, when those those relevant impossible states come about, right, where 2 states of affairs are contradicting each other, we're going to call that the logical law of non-contradiction. After the fact, after we see what's possible or not for God to do or not do. So the ultimate grounding is God's nature and what he's capable of doing or not. And that provides the standard kind of thing. It's not, oh, well, it's impossible because that would violate some external law that is binding on God. No, it's just impossible given his nature. His essence can't do those things. And we ascribe those things a lot. Okay, well, those are illogical. That's why God can't do it. We describe it after the fact. Same deal with his morality. God can't rape or kill an innocent baby for fun. He can't do that. It's not, oh, well, he can't do it because that would be bad. No, he can't do that. He doesn't value that. And therefore, we come along after the fact and say, oh, well, he doesn't value killing innocent babies for fun because that's immoral. That's bad. We put that label on it, kind of thing. So it's not consistent with what God can do and or what he values and versus disvalues. So God's nature is the standard. That's the ultimate. There's no more questioning above that kind of thing. It is what it is. It's not. Does that make sense?
I mean, I'm not sure, because again, it doesn't seem like there is anything that accounts for why he cannot do that. You're just saying like presented like he's a brute fact. God cannot do this, period. But what I think is precisely what makes it impossible is the fact that it violates the law of non-contradiction, right? But you're not giving an account what makes that impossible, because remember, God is omnipotent. So like everything that is logically possible, or in principle, everything is possible. But why is that contradicting? Why is a contradiction or contradicting his nature? Why is that impossible? I can contradict my nature if I want. Like, let's say I'm usually.
You can't code nature. Can you change your genes to become a different species?
No, but I can act different than the way that I normally do. For example, I could say I will normally never be. I don't know, a liar. For example, my normal nature is to be normally honest. But if I wanted to, I had the power, I have at least the capability to be dishonest, for example. Or,
yeah,
I could do it.
We're finite libertarian free will creatures. God's determined by his nature. He doesn't have a choice. There's no free will choice. He is logical by essence. He can't change it. He's morally perfect by essence. He can't choose to sin at all. And yeah, he's morally determined. He's logically determined. We are not, as finite human being creatures. We have libertarian free will, so we can choose to sin and to do immoral stuff, and we can choose to be illogical at times.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But yeah, look up Dr. William Lane Craig.
God also has libertarian. Sorry, God also has libertarian freedom, right? God chose to create, right? You don't think God is free also, or don't you think that?
No, absolutely. God has libertarian free will, but it's in certain cases he doesn't, right? So when it comes to morality, he's not a free will agent. He's morally perfect, and he's by essence he's determined by his own nature, his own values. God can't choose to be like, you know what, I like rape, actually it's pretty good, let's do that now. Okay, I ordered you no raping, no pillaging, no killing. From now on, let's do that. He can't do that. Whereas me and you, we could switch. We could choose to, all right, I'm going to start going out and pillaging now with Attila the Hun or something like that. So God's determined. He's different in certain respects. In other respects, he does have libertarian free will, such as his choice to create.
Right, that almost sounds like we can do things that God cannot, right? Like we have an ability
Yeah.
that God doesn't have, you know?
Yeah, we
That's
have the
weird.
ability. Yeah, well, I mean, it's all grounded in God. Remember, right? Remember, you were
Right,
the one
right.
that argued
You know,
evil is great.
yeah. I saw you had a debate with Phil Blair, like on this is like, can God lie?
Yes.
I thought it
Yeah.
was, my take on this is absolutely, can a perfect moral being lie? My take is absolutely yes. He can if he wanted to, because he at least to answer I don't think there is any contradiction in that, because somebody is going to say no, because if he's morally perfect, he will never want to do it. But I think he at least has the capability to do it. To ask the question, can he do it, is to ask if he has the capability to do it in the case that he wanted to. But it just happens to be that because he's morally perfect, he will never want to. But I think, yes, he has the capability. So when people, I think, debate this, I think the answer is, if God exists and is morally perfect, can he lie if he wanted to? I think obviously yes. I think for that's the way I see it. But
Yeah.
I didn't see the full debate. I don't know what do you think of that.
No, so in that debate is precisely why I'm answering the way I am. I changed my mind fundamentally on that front, because when I was in the debate, I was arguing as you did. I said that it was logically possible for God to choose to lie or to sin. He had that ability. There were logically possible worlds where God sins, but there were no metaphysically possible worlds where God sins. That was my
Okay.
argument, I'm saying. But I changed that because now I realized no, actually God exists even in the his values are the same in the logic in all logically possible worlds. So that means he is logically speaking, he is morally determined in every world. He is this he can't be choose to sin then. There is no logically possible world where he chooses contrary to his own morally perfect nature. So that's why I changed my mind there to be more consistent with traditional theism.
Okay, I see. Yeah,
The,
okay. Sure. Okay. I, is there anything else you want to talk about? I think that's
in
good
terms
enough.
of
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of their video, did I? Um, oh, shoot, I'm covering the. I think there was one other thing,
Yeah,
maybe,
sure.
maybe not. Did, okay, no, I think yeah, I think that covers. Yeah, the only other thing that maximally great island, but I think we
Yeah.
kind of covered that already by saying, look, again, that's a parody for Alvin Plantinga's maximally great being, not a real maximally great being necessarily. And number one, the flaw is okay, well, what is the subjective judgment of a maximally great island? Does it have trees? Does it have a beach? Is it a desert? It's subjective relative to people's tastes, is
Oh,
number
but okay.
one
But do
objective.
you think? But you think being is like obviously objective according to everyone's taste? Like once, I think you have a similar problem. Like, is this being funny or is it serious? Is it cool? There are many other things where that a conscious being can be, and there will be some degree of subjectivity there as well.
Yeah, yeah. So you're saying like that's the objection to the maximally great island parody, why it's disanalogous to a maximal great being. Now, in terms of the maximally great being, it and its definition again, that wasn't the argument I made today, but Alvin Plantinga does that. and that's the video you did on. So he defines that in terms of certain properties: omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence. Clearly, it is. I think you're foolish if you say, yeah, being an ignorant dummy is better than being knowledgeable. Sorry, the more knowledge you have, the better. That's obvious. And if you could have all propositional knowledge, beautiful. Having powers are a good thing.
Hold on. Sorry, hold on. What if there is they say, sometimes they say ignorance is a bliss. What if there is a piece of knowledge that will make you sad? So it's better, it will be, in that case, it will be better not to know it. So it's not like obvious, it's not like extremely obvious that knowing something is always good. Like, I think like if you knew that you were going to die in 5 years, for example, I think it will make you sad these 5 years. So I think in a certain way, it's almost better if I was going to die the next 5 years, it's almost better if I didn't know that, for example, in a way. Do you think that?
So I do agree that God gets sad. I don't believe in impassibility, and sometimes his knowledge causes him anger. It causes him things, but these are not necessarily bad in themselves. And I still think it's better to have all knowledge. Ignorance is bliss is a fool's saying. It lacks all wisdom and discernment, because clearly it's better to have all the knowledge. And for God, who's omniscient, you would know how to react to certain things like that, or you would know all of the goods that come back, and that would make you very happy, even when hearing a sad thing like, my grandfather died today, or something like that. But God in his omniscience would also know all of the good things, that life coming to completion, that he's also now going to heaven to spend eternal relationship with him, and that life is going to be honored in his descendants and stuff like that. So, yep, some of the knowledge can affect you, and I believe it affects God. But it works all ways. So all things considered, I would always rather have knowledge and not be ignorant, kind of thing. Same with powers. It's greater to have power over being impotent and having no power and just being helpless and stuff. So, yeah, to be omnipotent and have the power to, cause anything to come about is better than having no powers to bring anything about, or to bring any good effects about, or anything. And same with benevolence. I think we would all agree, being good is better than being an immoral bad guy. So if you're good, if you're morally perfect, way better than being a sinner, kind of thing. Being Satan.
Okay. This may be getting into other topic, but what about the Trinity? Don't you think that this is arbitrary in a way, that the maximally great thing is going to be either one person or infinite persons, right? Three just will be you cannot tell me that the optimum or the best possible way is three. Like why would that be the case? It feels arbitrary in a certain way,
Yeah, so I totally agree. Look, the arguments for God's existence, including the ontological argument, simply argues for a real maximally great being, right? So it's at the level of being, and that's
same with that. It's obvious that you don't get the Trinity from that, but what I'm saying is even worse. Like, maximally great, the Trinity is incompatible with being maximally great, because there is one maximally great number of person is going to be either infinite or one, right? It's not going to be three. So I'm not just saying that you don't deduce the Trinity from that. I'm saying that the Trinity is incompatible with your definition of maximally great being.
I don't see how that comes about at all. Jerome Gelman has an argument in terms of omnipotence that I buy with separate beings. But when you have a tri-personal being, or any number of personal beings, they're united in soul and essence, then that's a totally different ballgame. The problems that you're envisioning are not a problem at all. It just becomes a question, I guess, of like, well, why is it three and not four or two or 500 or something like that? And there are different ways to approach that. Philosophically, Richard Swinburne's argument I think can be made to work with some modifications, whereby 3 is the precise number, the greatest number to exemplify selfless love. So, in order to exhibit love, you need at least another person to, love, and they love you, kind of thing. But you also need a third person, because if it's going to be selfless love, which is greater than selfish love, you want that person to have another person to love, and that other person to love them without you needing to be involved. So 3 is the minimum number to bring that state of affairs about, kind of thing. So that's an argument for the Trinity. That's the simplest explanation to actualize selfless love. And then the other argument is we have divine revelation, which tells us that that maximally great being just so happens to be a tri-personal being.
Okay. Well, yeah, about revelation is another topic, but I could do some pushback against this. But I could say, why do you have to exemplify selfless love? What you could also say that God is by nature, by essence, merciful, and the best way to exemplify being merciful is for there to be someone who is a wrongdoer who deserves mercy. So that would necessitate a person, a divine person that is wrong, immorally wrong, so that it deserves mercy. That's how God will exemplify being merciful, for example. So why is God not exemplifying the property, or doesn't have to exemplify the property of being merciful?
So merciful is what you're talking about. Like what was the argument? So he needs like a sinner to be involved, like a sinner?
Yeah, because if you're saying, okay, to exemplify love, selfless love, it necessitates these other persons, right, to love them. So, okay, another of God's properties is to be merciful and fair. So it will necessitate somebody to be merciful towards, and that person will have to be a wrongdoer, because you don't deserve mercy unless you have done something wrong, right? So that would necessitate a divine person that is a wrongdoer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here's the key problem. This is the same thing the Muslim metaphysician said in my debate with him on the Trinity, only he used forgiveness instead of the property of being merciful. So here's the thing. The properties of being forgiving, and or merciful are better, they're greater in potential form rather than actualized form. It is better if you never have to forgive. It is better if you never have to be merciful. The ideal is that nobody does sin, that they live in moral perfection, just like the Trinity. So being potentially forgiving is a perfection. It is a great making property. But being actually forgiving, that only makes sense once somebody actually sins. But if it's possible and for perfection to obtain, that is better. It's a state of affairs where you never have to forgive or be merciful is better compared to one where, shoot, you messed up, but I'm going to do the greatest thing I can given you screwed up, and I'm going to forgive you, and I'm going to be merciful towards you.
Okay. But I think the state of affairs that is also, you could also say that it's better, like, if you don't have to love anybody to be joy or to be happy, or like if you can be fine alone without needing anyone else to love, like that's better than you need somebody else to exist so you can love them and feel joy or whatever, right? So again, it will, like, it's better if you're just completely impossible, don't need to feel anything, you don't have to love anybody, so nobody has to exist because you don't need that, it doesn't do anything to you to love. And that's even better, like even higher than, okay, you need this person, so that brings to love, and that brings you joy, for example.
I would just disagree with this. And I think, obviously in terms of the Bible says no man is an island unto themselves. And I think most human beings who are normally functioning ones and aren't psychopaths or sociopaths and stuff, and obviously malfunctioning due to sin with their faculties, they would agree, no, a loving relationship, I'd rather have that, where it's a perfectly loving relationship, no possibility of betrayal. They love you for who you are unconditionally and are there to help you as your helpmate. Like the true loving relationship that's comparable to what we get with God, that's way better than, I don't need no love. I'm independent all by myself. I think every normal functioning human being sees no, that I'll take the loving relationship. That's way greater than the I'm doing it all myself kind of thing.
Yeah, because that's because humans will lack that in a way. If we didn't have that, we will feel lonely, for example. But a fly, for example, is not going to lack that. So, I mean, somebody could make the case that if I mean you already if you are the human being that needs that, then of course it's better to have it. But in principle, what is it better? Like maybe the fly is better. Like it doesn't need to. It doesn't do anything if it do, if it's someone there. If a
Is
bird flies there or not, it doesn't make any difference to it, right? Maybe that's
Yeah.
better, right?
So
Like
is it better not to have the need at all? I'll just put it to the audience. Do you want to be an independent fly, or do you want to be a dependent, relationally
because
dependent human being? And but by the way, it's not just human beings; it's all persons. God is also dependent on us. He is impacted by and benefits from, and he's detrimented by the relationships he engages in with human beings. I'm not a Calvinist. I'm denying all of God's immutability and impassibility. No, he gains and is detrimented by his relationships with humans. So I think it's inherent to
oh,
personhood
really,
that you
you
need
deny
relationship.
impossibility. Really, that's really
I'm
problematic. That's one of the big
sorry,
four in the divine simplicity, right? Impossibility.
impassibility. I absolutely deny that, and I deny
Really?
immutability.
Oh,
God,
really?
yeah. That God is the Bible teaches God is changeless in five specific areas, but it doesn't say that there can't be any lateral changes, right? For example, I
But there is
believe
no,
God's.
yeah, but there
Oh,
is
go
no
ahead.
time for God. That God is timeless and eternal, so it, it doesn't match. Change doesn't
Not
go
according
well
to me.
with the idea of eternal and time in being
I think God's
time.
temporal. I agree with William Lane Craig on that. So he does change. His knowledge changes, for example, each day, um, and stuff like that. But also, God is he's emotionally impacted, right? When I take the Bible seriously, when he says he's angry, he's experiencing anger. When he is grieving over, the Holy Spirit is grieving or something, that's literal. He's upset when people betray him and sin, and he's happy as heck when people place their faith in Jesus and come to faith in Jesus and are saved.
Yeah, okay, okay, that's cool. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it or not, that was part of my master's thesis
Oh, really?
paper, in how I provided a symmetry breaker between an evil God and a good God, and I argue only a good God could make the choice to create. An evil God,
Oh,
if it's a libertarian free choice, an evil God could never choose to create. So,
that's cool.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you keep freezing. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that's all. I want.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
You. Yeah.
huh?
Or is there anything else we can wrap it up? I think. Like if I don't think if there are any other questions, I think that's all.
Okay. Yeah. So just to wrap up, closing. Yeah, I think I appreciate you bringing me on. I hope I brought something information that's helpful because I think this ontological argument is honestly the greatest proof. It's not even just evidence; it is proof, 100% proof in my books. And I
But
think once you,
sorry,
oh,
sorry to interrupt you. Why don't philosophers? But most philosophers don't agree with that. You know that, right?
but not for good reasoning. It's this misperception, I would say, is that they think it's some kind of trick, but they can't ask them to put their finger on what's wrong with it. That, well, I don't know, but if I accept this, then I have to accept that, accept a whole bunch of stuff I don't want to accept, and like, no, you don't, not necessarily like that. So I just think there's an irrational perception about it, and among the laymen there's this misperception that, oh, you're just defining God into existence. No, we're not. There are premises, and there are certain logical entailments given certain axioms in modal logic that are accepted by the majority, and the definition, what is the concept of God, what does God mean. Well, once we understand that definitionally, and in light of the modalogical axioms, there are certain entailments about that, and it's deductive argumentation. You can't deny the conclusion just because you don't like it. When I taught my critical thinking students in first year university, we taught them you never object to the conclusion, right? That's not how you object to an argument in critical thinking. You have to either object to one or more of the premises in light of, either the inference, you object to the inference, so it's an invalid or a non-cogent argument if it's an inductive argument, or you object to one or more of the premises on the basis of the evidence doesn't prove that they're probably true or not. Those are the grounds, the premises and the inference. You never just go, oh, well, I don't like the conclusion, so therefore I'm just going to assume something's wrong. And that's the fundamental flaw of these parity arguments, and the way it's treated, I find, is you don't like the conclusion, so okay, let me give you a conclusion you don't like, and we'll just assume the argument falls apart or something. No, that's not good enough. You've got to look at the inferences and the premises. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, that was I do think it seems like a trick in a way. Just I don't know, but I agree it's very hard to explain like why exactly that doesn't work. But yeah.
But I appreciated that you were refreshing in that, like, okay, you don't go for the typical objections that most atheists do. So I found that interesting and challenging to see if did I do anything in convincing you or pushing you closer to accepting premise 3, or no, you're still the same?
No, I have to look at, I really want to look at once the show is over. I want to go over the syllogisms you have with the symbol you have in the formal logic. I have to go one by one and look at it because I didn't have time. That's I forget. I learned formal logic a bit, but I forget.
Like I said, if you don't like axiom S5, because even though the majority of philosophers accept it, there is a little controversy. Forget axiom S5. We don't need it. You can still get there with axiom B plus axiom S4, and those are a lot more simplistic. They're not controversial. So check out both, and you'll get to the same premise.
Yeah, okay. Yes, that's great. I'm gonna check that out. Yeah. Thank you for coming. Also, I appreciate that. There was a lot of fun. We had a lot of people today in the audience. A lot of comments. It's usually it's the first time it's been so active, so it's pretty cool. Yeah.
You're saying there's a lot of comments or something, right?
Yeah. I never seen the chat so active before in a live.
Awesome.
So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
I don't know if I can take the credit there because I'm not that popular.
Yeah.
I think it's the topic. People are
just maybe it's the topic, or maybe the channel is growing. I don't know. But I think it's the topic because the channel was the same like 2 weeks ago or a month ago. So I think maybe the topic was interesting. I don't know. Yeah. So thank you guys very much for being here and for watching. And please go check out Dale's channel. He has some very interesting content as well. I'm gonna put a link in the description. And
like I said, no problem. And on my end, just so your audience knows, if you're interested, so next week, I'm having a debate on the resurrection with David Russell. I haven't had him on the show in over a year. He's from the Faith Unaltered podcast, versus the resurrection skeptic David Kemble Cook, and he's going to be on the show debating that on Saturday. And after that, I will be on Capturing Christianity on the 24th, debating the Eucharistic Miracle of Lanciano with Ethan Muse. He's an expert in those. So
about that, why didn't they ask Kevin not contradict? He will be like the best guy.
He refused. I don't know why.
Really?
Like, he didn't want to do it.
He will be like the best. He like the one skeptic that really focuses on that topic. That's like his main topic. And capturing his Christianity is such a huge channel that will give him so much visibility. Why didn't he? How come he refused?
I have no idea. He just said he wasn't interested, is what I heard through the grapevine. But I think it'll be better with me because I'm trying to provide some argumentation, even argumentation that's not just based on like a naturalistic worldview. So I can, because I'm a Christian, I can open up to, theistic objections as well,
Okay.
and stuff like that. So hopefully I'll contribute something that'll be interesting.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah. So guys, stay tuned for that. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and see you